Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive question, one that comes up every time one of nature's most destructive forces starts to spin up. With all our technology, can we actually stop a hurricane? All right, let's just dive right in. And to even begin to answer that question, we have to get our heads around one fundamental challenge. This is the one thing you've got to remember through this whole thing. And it's that hurricanes are, well, they're just unbelievably enormous.
And I mean, to really put that into perspective for you, a typical medium-sized hurricane, it covers an area roughly the size of the entire state of Texas. So we're not just talking about a storm here. This is a weather system that can literally dominate a huge chunk of a continent.
And of course, when these massive systems finally hit land, they leave behind this incredible trail of destruction. We're talking damages that don't just hit the billions of dollars mark, they blow right past it, time and time again.
So you can see why this raises a pretty obvious question, right? It's one people have been asking for decades. With everything we can do now, why can't we just, blast them apart, nudge them out to sea, or maybe even stop them from forming in the first place? Well, it turns out people have had some, let's call them explosive ideas about that. And probably the most persistent one, the one that just keeps coming back, is to fight this overwhelming force with our most powerful weapon, the nuke. And this isn't just some modern internet what-if scenario. No way. The idea to nuke a hurricane has been around since the literal dawn of the atomic age. We're talking the mayor of Miami Beach asking about it back in 1945, all the way up to presidents reportedly asking the same question in recent years. It's an idea that just refuses to die. You see, the theory, at least as it was laid out back in the 50s, wasn't just about mindless brute force. It was actually kind of clever. The idea was to detonate a nuke right in the calm eye of the storm, to try and disrupt the very engine that powers the whole thing.
But here comes the reality check. And it is all about a staggering, almost unimaginable difference in scale. A hurricane releases something like 10,000 times more energy every single hour than an early atomic bomb did in its entire detonation. Let that sink in. Per hour.
I mean, this just perfectly sums up the core problem, doesn't it? You're not just up against a big storm. You're trying to pick a fight with a force of nature that has the same kind of power output as the entire planet's power consumption. All of it.
So what does this all mean? Well, even if you completely ignore the, disastrous radioactive fallouts, our biggest, baddest weapon is like a tiny firecracker against a raging bonfire. It just all comes back to that first thing we said. Hurricanes are absolutely enormous.
Okay, so nukes are out. Brute force is a non-starter. So what about a more subtle approach? Could we maybe tame the storm? Trick it into raining itself out before it even gets close to land?
Well, that brings us to this technique called cloud seeding. The basic idea is you fly up and spray these tiny particles into clouds, and that encourages water droplets to form and fall as rain. The hope is you could weaken a hurricane, bleed off some of its energy before it can do major damage. And believe it or not, the US government actually tried this. It was called Project Storm Fury, and it was led by a meteorologist named, and I'm not making this up, Robert Homer Simpson. So they went out, they sprayed a hurricane with silver iodide, and it actually looked like it was working. The storm weakened. But, yeah, researchers later figured out it was pretty much just a coincidence. Hurricanes change intensity all the time on their own, and so the project was scrapped.
And once again, we come crashing right back into that same old problem. Even if cloud seeding was a surefire thing, think about it. You'd need a whole fleet of planes, an army of them, just to cover an area the size of Texas. The scale of the problem is just, it's too big.
All right, so if we can't fight the storm head-on, what if we get smarter? What if we attack its power source? Let's talk about cutting off the fuel. Now, to get this, we just need a super quick refresher on how hurricanes are born. At their heart, they're just giant heat engines. And what's the fuel? Warm ocean water. That warm, moist air rises up, it forms clouds, the Earth's rotation gives it a little spin, and this whole cycle just feeds on itself until you have a monster on your hands. Okay, so if warm water is the fuel, let's cool it down, right? Simple. Well, not so much. Two main ideas have been floated. The first one is kind of wild, dragging huge icebergs down from the poles. As you can imagine, that's a logistical nightmare. But a second, more promising idea, actually patented by a group that included Bill Gates, is to use these huge pumps to bring cold water up from deep in the ocean.
But even with this more realistic idea, you still have to get these massive pumps out into the middle of the ocean, cover an area that's 20 to 40 miles wide, and do it at exactly the right moment. So, once again, we're right back where we started. The problem is that hurricanes are just so incredibly enormous.
So where does that leave us? If brute force fails, and even our cleverest engineering ideas can't handle the scale, is it just hopeless? Well, maybe not. It might just mean we've been thinking about the problem completely backwards.
See, the answer probably isn't about finding a weapon big enough to slay the giant. It's about stopping the giant from ever getting that big in the first place.
So the real solution, the real silver bullet, isn't about bigger bombs or massive pumps. It's about brains over brawn. The key is investing in better weather forecasts, more precise, longer-range prediction.
Think about it. Hurricanes don't just pop into existence. They take several days to form, growing from smaller pre-existing storms. So if, and this is a big if we could predict with really high accuracy which of those little storms is going to grow into a monster, then maybe, just maybe, some of those other ideas we talked about, like cloud seeding or cooling the water, could actually work, but on a much smaller, more targeted scale. We could disrupt the growth cycle before it becomes unstoppable.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? The challenge might not be about power for much longer. It might become about prediction and decision. If we knew, with certainty, exactly where and when a catastrophic storm was going to be born, what would we do? Would we have the will to step in? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.